Hello everybody, how's it going? Mark here. We're going to be talking about some of the other spellcasters and their spells. So we're going to be looking at the sisters, and then we're going to be looking at the warrior priest. So let's start with sisters. We're going to start with Sigmar Smite. And what Sigmar Smite does, it increases melee critical hit chance and melee damage by 5% for 2 turns, that's the basic one, and the mastery increases melee crit chance and melee damage by 10% for 3 rounds instead. The mastery version is obviously like much better because it lasts 3 turns. Another good thing about this sort of a spell is that it also like applies to yourself, so it's not just like people around the caster, but it's also the caster herself. Yeah, I think the mastery is I think it's fair to say that the mastery is good, right? Like the 10% crit chance is quite nice. I mean, 10% crit chance might be like the difference maker between being able to crit somebody or not. So yeah. And the other nice thing is that it's also like kind of stackable with the basic version. And so the basic version, I don't really think it's like viable on like the regular spellcasters, but I think it's actually something that is playable on Maiden, because Maiden, she has actually well, in Paramod, she has her spellcasting cost reduced of all her spells by 1. So this sort of a spell goes actually 1 for the Maiden. And if you're going to be using Quick Prayer, you're going to be able to apply this buff to yourself for SP instead of OP. And not only that, like with the Maiden, right? If you're gonna be casting a spell for 1 SP, you may have like the Rune of Enervation, or you also might have like the two-handed hammer. And so like in that case, like actually casting like this spell may result in more offensive points. So you may have like some kind of a spell engine, which is kind of interesting. So for that purposes, I think it's not bad, because I think it has purpose for the Maiden. As for the blessing of athleticism, it gives you like dodge and parry bypass by 10%, and it also gives you some minor climb, leap, and jumped out tests by 10% for 2 turns. And the mastery, it's by 15%, but it's for 3 turns. Both of these are stackable. Maybe like the first thing I would mention is that the Purifier actually starts with the basic version of the spell in Paramod. In Vanilla, I think she starts with Comet, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, she actually does start with a Comet. I don't really like that Purifier is actually starting with the spell. Because, well, I think it's just like this sort of a spell is like extremely specific, and I think it's just for the Daredevil builds. I don't think you really want the spell otherwise. So I would also like to see like Purifier. Like, I understand that this is like in Paramount this is a 2nd tier level spell, but I feel like it's fine for some caster to start, for a caster to start with a 2nd tier level spell. And I think like all the purifiers do want the Comet, in my opinion, so I think it would just kind of make more sense overall. But yeah, like this sort of thing, the basic version, I think this is like also the same thing as I was saying with the Sigmar Smite. You only use it for the cases of the Maiden, or you use it because you're forced to use it, because your Sigmar's Purifier has to have the spell, unfortunately. So for those purposes, I think it's just kind of like not bad, because it's just Daredeviling. And the mastery is I feel like I'm just gonna also put this into the not bad. And there's not like too big of a difference between the two. But they just kind of help with Daredevil. The increases to climb, leap, and jump down, they're kind of whatever. And the pirate bypass, I don't think it really makes all that much sense, considering that they don't really, like Sister don't really have like access to parry weapons. So yeah. But I actually like that Maiden starts with silence, with simple speech. So let's talk actually about like simple speech. And the effect is that it's a debuff and you prevent spellcasting for 1 turn. And the mastery prevents spellcasting for 3 turns instead, and you also increase the range to 30 meters from 15 meters. So I think the base version is just kind of good. Again, this is like a sort of a spell that Maiden starts with, and I really like that she actually kind of starts with the spell. It's quite nice. What I also really like about this sort of a spell, that in a way this kind of allows sisters to play without magic resistance, although like sisters are kind of playable with magic resistance. There are actually some counters to this spell. It's called the, what do you call it? It's the consumable, which removes magic effects. And there's also the Idol of Change, because Idol of Change removes all the effects. And I don't think I'm gonna count like the spell itself as a possible counter, although it is a possible counter. I'm not gonna count it because, well, you need to be able to cast the spell. So you would need to have 2 Warlock bros helping each other out. That sounded a little bit weird. But yeah, I think it's just good. And I think the mastery is amazing. I think mastery probably, like for me, goes to the god tier category. Now granted, this is just theory crafting, because I haven't actually used this in practice, but my assumption is that this sort of a skill is, spell, is really oppressive and it's gonna be completely brutal and might just destroy the enemy. So I assume this is gonna be God's tier, honestly. In PvP, of course. And let's go next. Oh, the Hearts of Griffin. I mean, we already know that Hearts of Griffin are gonna be Hearts of the Griffin are gonna be, it's gonna be reworked as a spell because it's weird right now. So the basic version, it grants immunity to all alone tests for 2 turns, which is kind of whatever. Not to mention, like, sisters also have the Sigmar Purifier, who is already immune to all alone tests. So it is also just kind of like a little bit whatever, but also it's just kind of impossible to cast. For 3 offensive points, it's not something that you would cast in the middle of a fight, really. And yeah, Maiden also doesn't have like any issues with this stuff, so kind of a pointless spell. Granted, so it's more like spell for the, what do you call her? The woman, the Sigmarite matriarch. And yeah, it's pretty much a spell for Sigmarite matriarch. Granted, like, you do apply these buffs to also other sisters, so that's kind of the thing. And the mastery, it also like grants immunity to fear. The duration is upped as well. And why is there written that range increases to 30 meters? Oh, wait, what? Oh, so Hearts of the Griffin is like a whoosh. It's like a sphere that you can like put on somebody. That's interesting. I didn't know that this was like a range. I thought it was just like around you. Oh, interesting. Is it? Huh. I mean, Hearts of the Griffin, if that's the case, because I like nobody's using Hearts of the Griffin because of the way it is. Because currently it just, like, who cares that it gives you immunity to fear? Because you want to be immune to terror. So I suppose you could be like stacking it hypothetically with the warrior priest spell, which grants immunity, which we'll talk about as well. And in that case, you could also do that. I mean, it's a thing that you could do, like this sort of a stacking thing. But if it actually is worth it, it's rather questionable, in my opinion. Okay, so like the basic version, I'm gonna put this into bad. And the master is also kind of bad. Okay, let's go to the next spell. It's called Divine Revelation. So Divine Revelation increases range resistance and melee resistance by 5% for 2 turns, and it's not stackable. And the Mastery grants range resistance increases 30% and melee resistance to 10% for 3 turns instead, and the range is increased to 30 meters. I'm just gonna start with Mastery because it's gonna be easier. The 30 meters is just like amazing. And also just compare Divine Revelation to any of the passive skills that you have. Like, you will never, there is no skill in the game that provides you with 10% melee resistance and 30% range resistance simultaneously. Yeah, and if you like think about it like this way, like concealment gives you like 30% range resistance and it's like 6 skill points ability. So in that case, I think like the Divine Revelation is completely insane. It's also like Warband defining spell, in my opinion. So I think it's really freaking good. Not to mention, you can also like stack it with the basic version. But yeah, this one, I think it's God tier. Because you can even like apply it to henchmen, right? Like, imagine giving your henchman like amazing fucking skill. And it's like a spell, but you can give literally everybody in your warband this thing. And I think it's utterly insane, so yeah. And the basic version, I think the basic version is actually just kind of not bad. If I can see the basic version being run, I would assume this would be on the Maiden of Sigmar. Otherwise, I'm not really sure if it's worth it. Maybe this kind of depends like how range heavy the enemy warband is. And now we get to Comet of Sigmar. So Comet of Sigmar, it's worse Lightning Strike. It is like lower damage, of course. I wonder if it's actually the same damage as the Wolf Priest spell. Frostbite. Oh yeah, it is actually literally the same. So it's just kind of like pure damage spell. With no upside. But still, I think it's just really good. Because it's damage. It's like magic damage. And it's also just really good because it just makes sense for the sisters, because they have like access to Sigmarite Warhammers. And Sigmarite Warhammers, they reduce the target's magic resistance by 8% for 3 turns, and you can like stack it a lot. So like I literally had a situation where I had a 100% roughly, oh sorry, I guess a more appropriate would be like 90% magic resistance executioner. And then like those Sigmarite Warhammers just basically more or less reduce the magic resistance to 0, so that really fucking sucked. So it's kind of brutal in that sense, that like no matter how much magic resistance enemy has, like sisters are gonna get through it. And if sisters are gonna get through it, they're also gonna get like through any armor that you use and so on. Also, sisters have access to the Sigmar's Great Hammer, and this thing is more for like spamming the spells. Well, kind of. Like, at the same time, it's like a two-handed weapon, which is like damage oriented because it bypasses armor. So what you can do is either like quick prayer and cast the this thing together with quick prayer, or you can also just kind of weave it in together with the attacks. I think that's also like a thing that is possible to do. So this one, like the basic version, I believe it's probably just not worth casting, in my opinion. And the mastery, yeah, and this is also like kind of like the reason why I think like the Sigmar Purifier should start with this sort of a spell, because it doesn't change anything about her. It just allows Sigmar Purifier to come online like much earlier. Like, not to mention, she doesn't gain intelligence at as high of a rate as Warlock, so it also just scales overall much more slowly. So the mastery is, I think it's fair to put it into really good category because of what everything else what sisters provide, which is like the magic piercing. Next one is Circle of Healing. No, it's Healing Circle, sorry. So Healing Circle, it restores up to 100 wounds, and it's one use only, and the Mastery restores 200 wounds. So like the important thing to remember about the Healing Circle is that it doesn't heal the caster herself, it only heals the units around her, which I think is honestly fair, because this is like a really freaking powerful spell. I think the mastery is like much better than the basic version. The basic version I would put this to good, but the only issue that the Healing Circle right now has is that once you cast it and you fail the cast, you're kind of screwed because you're gonna lose the spell forever. You can cast it only once in Paramod. But I believe like Para is gonna be changing that in the patch notes, and the healing spells, if they fail, you're gonna still be able to cast them until you don't fail, and you actually are able to cast them. So yeah. And the mastery, I think the mastery is better because the mastery also gives you like a higher casting chance overall, and like the wound restore is gonna be much more relevant. And I think this actually just plays a lot into the strategy of sisters. I think sisters really just kind of love swarming the enemy while being tanky. So I think what happens a lot when you're kind of fighting sisters, because they're usually like heavy armor, they can be like also like heavy armor sort of users. So you can often like find yourself in a situation where there's like a lot of like a bunch of 1v1s against the enemy because you're kind of rushing him, and your sisters they lost like 100 or like 200 health or something like that. Then you can come in with a Healing Circle and it's utterly brutal. It's just gonna like destroy people. It has happened against me. It really sucked. Yeah, like Healing Circle can be a total game changer if there's like the proper opportunity. I mean, the worst case scenario is that the units just die before you're able to do anything, right? But I think like the sisters are overall tanky enough. Even like there's like basically two approaches to sisters. There's either the approach of heavy armor and getting hit as much as possible, or there's also like the Serenity approach. So you're gonna have like a melee resistance tank, which plays into the divine revelation and stuff. So both builds are kind of tanky. So I think I'm gonna put this one to insane. Yeah, and the last skill, the last spell that we have is actually Sigmar's Second Wind. So it restores up to 2 offense points, but it consumes up to 2 strategy points, and if the target is stunned, it will also recover. And the mastery restores 4 offensive strategy points, and it increases the range from 15 to 30 meters. So the basic is just bad because you get like a bad deal out of it. Like for you're trading 4 offensive points of your caster for 2 offense points of your well, ideally maiden, right? Plus, like, also the basic version has horrible range, so it's really inflexible as well. So maybe honestly, I think this just kind of like belongs more in the horrendous tier. I mean, Hearts of the Griffin at least like do something, but let's actually kind of think about like Sigmar's Second Wind here for a second. And yeah, I think like Kitten Paul was already mentioning it, like, but also like here's the thing about Sigmar's Second Wind: you may be even able to generate more. You may be able to generate even more offensive points than what actually Sigmar's Second Wind offers. So it's not just like a fair exchange of 4 offensive points for another 4 offensive points, which can be used for the melee attacks for the maiden. But if you have something like a quick prayer or innervation, like the spellcasting enchantment, or if you have the Sigmarite Great Hammer as well, which has like a 50% chance to recover 1 offense points. I think you can very often just end up in a situation where you're able to change like 9 offensive points into 12 offense points. And these 12 offense points can be used for melee attacks with the maiden, right? But more realistically speaking, it's not gonna be like 6 attacks with maiden. It's more like gonna be like 5 attacks, because you're gonna be also using, because this spell like drains the strategy points from the character, you're gonna be also using a lot, what do you call it, you're gonna be using exhaustion, and I think you're also gonna be using meditation in order to actually approach your next target and to kill it. So this is like a sort of a solo maiden build. I think Kit and Paul played it before. And this should be... I haven't played it, but it's like an extremely specific warband build. Like you have to be like very... Like I know exactly how the sort of a warband would look. Maybe my biggest worry about this sort of a warband would be if you have like enough seconds to actually kill everybody, because usually in PvP you have like 90 seconds to take your turn, and I would be really afraid for the maiden. You would just kind of have to like go fast, basically. A bit of a like, what do you call it? APM. Maiden has overall a lot of APM builds in my opinion, like PvP wise. So I think this is just kind of like between insane and god tier, to be honest. This might be like more appropriate, but I'm just gonna like put this into insane category. Okay, so I think that's it for the sisters. I don't really think I have like anything else to add to them.